Hello and welcome to the Kelcast, the Hearthstone Arena podcast where we try to get better without cursing. I'm Keldar. I'm a longtime Infinite Leaderboard Arena player on Twitch. Joining me as my co-host is another Arena Leaderboard player, Kellen Abel. Remember, if you guys want to find us on social media, you can search Keldar on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter. That's Keludar. And if you want to find the podcast to listen to, you can search the Kelcast on Google. All right, Kellen, what are we doing this week?
Well, this week we're going to talk about the power of ping, all those little pieces of damage that add up to a much greater effect than just a single little tiny point of damage. It's been an important mechanic in Hearthstone. It goes back to the dawn of Hearthstone Arena's existence. It's part of hero powers, it's part of cards, it's part of every little thing you can think of. It's one of the most, I don't know, it's one of those things that slips under the radar, but turns out to be one of the most important things in the entire existence of Hearthstone Arena. But before we get into that, I was searching through the Arena HS subreddit, and I ran into this post that's getting quite a bit of traction about the best arena cards of all time. And I think you had something to do with that. What did you do there?
Well, I got this idea. I've been trying to think of some new content because, typically we have our kind of a cycle of content. We review cards, the new metas come out, and then we talk about the best classes and how to succeed, and then the worst classes, how to succeed with them. And I was just trying to think of some new stuff we could do. We've done a couple guest stuff, and we've done some roundtables. So we got some content that's kind of like expected by the viewership, but I wanted to try to come up with some new stuff. So then I was thinking, what if we did, I know that this has been done on... I actually try to base our podcast a lot about what I see on sports, because I watch a lot of sports and ESPN and stuff. And I think that the way that they present, the reason why sports stuff, if you're into that, is entertaining, is they do things where they do the top 100 players or whatever. And I was thinking, what if we did what I've seen on them do on ESPN, where they basically take they make a tournament bracket of players, and then they have them face off against each other one-on-one, and basically the one that wins, moves on. It's debated till it gets down to the final two, and then they face off for the best of whatever it is they're talking about. So I wanted to do that with arena cards. Interestingly enough, though, I didn't really think about how to make it fair. I had come up with some ground rules, and you guys can think about this if you want to comment on Twitter or on the videos about your favorite top 10 cards. Please leave that. You can either go to Reddit, the Arena HS Reddit, to comment there with everyone else, or you can leave it on the YouTube videos or whatever. But anyway, the ground rules are basically that we want to evaluate the cards as they were in their initial inception. So for instance, Shield of Minibot or something would be a card that could be considered as one of the best of all time. I'm not sure if it's going to make the cut, but I'm just saying right now it would not make the cut for sure. If you just look at the top cards right now, there's no way it would make it. But we want to evaluate them based on their impact and the time. The best example I can come up with probably is Firelands Portal. That card literally changed all of Arena, and even just the way that you approach Arena. And I wouldn't
I got a good one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say Velen's Chosen is a card that we don't even think of anymore, and it completely revolutionized how you played Priest in that one meta.
Exactly. Now, even though there are some cards like this that were insane at the time, we only are going to do. I was originally going to do 32, and then realized that there's just no way I can break it down that much, so I'm going to do 64. So basically, it's going to be the top 64 cards, and then we're gonna. I'm going to try to get some guests on. The idea is that when we get to a certain point near the end, we'll have a panel of 5 people, and we'll vote on each, as they go up, as cards go head to head against each other. We will we'll do a voting panel to decide who moves on, and then we'll figure out what's the best card of the most powerful arena card of all time. And to be honest, whatever we come up with there's probably going to be 10 other cards that probably could have won. It's just going to be
Do you have any front runners right now that you think would be are near the top of the most powerful in their meta cards of all time?
When my first initial thought was Sunkeeper Tarim, initially, but because of the impact at the time, it was a game over card.
And then I think it's going to end up being a non-legendary, because the legendaries were so dominant and broken, but the cards that we see, I feel like one of the commons that or uncommons or rares that completely reshaped a meta. I think Firelands Portal's not quite at that level, but it's close.
I think Firelands Portal has to be part of the 64 because of how big of an impact it had. But the funny thing is, if you have played Firelands Portals and metas beyond that, it actually isn't that great now. It's okay. It's still face damage and it's still solid, but it's amazing how certain cards. There are certain cards that do stand the test of time. We proved that Abyssal Enforcer is still just stupidly broken, things like that. But it'll be fun. I like the idea of like, I feel like the reason I really like this like debate and this like competition we're going to do is, one, it's good for the podcast because we can do it over multiple episodes. And two, I think that it shows kind of like a history of Arena. I think you get kind of a history. I think that's really cool. So that was my like, I think it's a super cool idea. We can do it with other things in the future. We can use it again. So anyway, we'll be starting that next week on the next episode. And I don't know exactly the format we're going to do in terms of how many episodes. It's probably going to be over like 3 or 4 episodes. We just have to, secure some guests to come on and be our panel. So it'll be fun. So, all right. So moving on, let's go and start talking about the episode. What we're going to talk about today, which is the power of ping. I've been actually wanting to bring this up for a while. But ping is just one of those things that is, like you were saying when you started the episode, it's very underrated. But you will find, if you really are looking at your decks and the way they're constructed, if you have decks that do not have ways to make pings happen, you can have a really strong, powerful deck and still not make it because of that one minion you couldn't remove because you didn't have 1 damage. And you'd be surprised how often 1 damage really, really matters. So.
And sometimes you won't even notice that it can make a big difference until you'll make a trade that you have to make because you don't have a ping. But if you had an Og Merchant or whatever type of ping possible in your hand or on the board, you'd be able to make value trades instead. So even when you don't have the ping, it slips under the radar, and it's hard to tell if it would have been important or not.
Yeah. One of the cards that I think brought this to the forefront recently is since Og Merchants have been in, and there's basically there's a couple different types of ping cards that I want to bring up. There's cards like Og Merchants that actually are a battle cry that it's a very cheap minion that just creates a ping by itself when you play it. That's one type. Then there's also pings through, like, there's things like Dread Infernal and Scorcher that basically were 1 damage AoEs. There was there was that one really broken demon that Warlock had, the 5-mana 4/5 that did 1 damage to the other side of the board. I forget what that one was called.
Repetitive base, Despicable Dreadlord.
Yeah, that one. So there's another one. So there's cards like that cause pings. Then there's also like there's actually spells that put like rush pings on the board. Those are also relevant. There's Coordinated Strike by Demon Hunter. There was actually one by Hunter a while back that was 6/1/1s that rushed. Obviously the biggest one right now that's probably the most powerful is Expendable Performers. So we're going to talk about those different cards. Oh, we also weapons. Weapons is the last type. There's some weapons that have pings built into them. So I know Kellen has one of his favorite weapons. It's the True Aim Crescent.
True Aim Crescent, yeah.
Yeah, so that one, they got that one. You got Light's Justice. We got the new Warrior weapon that it does things. We're going to talk about those and like why you want to put those in your deck. So yeah. So the first one, I guess we'll talk about the minion ones first. And I want to talk about the Og Merchants. So like Og Merchants is pretty amazing. One thing you'll notice if you draft, you'll typically see that they're they're rated the best card. Their win rates are the highest. And you might be wondering like, man, why is this win rate so high? The Og Merchants specifically are so crazy because you can use them for tempo to basically get the board back in the first 2 or 3 turns, which is totally fine. Like you don't need to get they all have a value. There's the rush one, there's the one that gives +1 spell damage, and there's the one that gives a divine shield. And that's what makes those cards so good is they are flexible cards that can be either used early game to remove cards, or they can be used late games for these huge swings. And they're just like so strong. And the fact that you can basically use it either way makes them that much better.
So I like to think of the Og Merchants in comparison to the Mage Hero Power. The Mage Hero Power is the most classic ping of all. It's two mana, deal 1 damage. So if that, obviously you're not expending a card, so that's a pretty important difference. But if you look at the cost of 2 mana for 1 damage, and then you compare that to the Og Merchant situation, you're getting a 1 mana 2/1 already. So you're almost getting like a mana and a half worth of extra value on top of your normal expected value from a 1-drop creature or minion, excuse me. I think that's it's for me. It's always helpful to look at it from the perspective of the mage hero power and see how much mana I'm really saving. And obviously, Og Merchants can't go face, but that's a pretty small cost to pay for getting to preserve a mana and a half in value on your possibly first play of the game.
Yeah, and of course, now Penflinger has been nerfed, but before it was nerfed, it was just disgustingly good in some decks, because you could actually just kill people with it. It's actually amazing how much less good it is not being able to go face. It's because now the way you get the value out of it is you have to use spells. It's just a lot more awkward, but it's still very good. Then we have obviously Rogue. You were talking about hero powers. Rogue has one of the basically this. Well, you can argue that maybe Demon Hunters is stronger, but that's also a ping. So we got Rogues whose hero power creates a 1/2 weapon. So you basically bank the hero power. So you get you basically get 2 pings for 2 mana. And then you have Demon Hunter, which essentially gets the same thing in a certain respect because they get now they have to spend it every turn, but they only have to spend 1 mana and they get a ping. And then there's Druid, of course, that has probably the weakest of the pings, but that exists, but it's still relevant. That you know how to use it. So
so I think some of the other hero or minion based pings that you could compare to hero powers. There's obviously the Stone Tusk Boar from olden days. It doesn't exist in the same format anymore, but that card is not good. But it didn't ruin your deck if you had it in it every time because it just helped you fill out a spot. There's been a number of Elven Archer variants like the is it Bilefin? Not Tidehunter. Oh shoot. 2 mana 2/1 Murloc deal and with the ping ability when it comes into play. There's just been a number of cheap minions that allow you to
the sniper. You're talking about the sniper.
Bluegill Sniper, thank you. Bluegill Sniper? Oh no.
Blowgill.
Well, anyways.
Yeah.
It's all of those minions that cost 1 or 2 mana and have a ping attached to them. They've all been fine throughout history. There's never been a meta where you didn't want them at all. So I think that's a pretty good indicator of the power of. And if you just look at the HS replay stats as well, it's very clear that those minions, in a way, they allow you to cheat on mana because that ping is so undervalued from a mana perspective, even though the bodies on the minions are so weak.
Right. And the one thing about, Hearthstone Arena specifically, and, in Constructed, you're basically building the most powerful deck you can based on all the cards that you're given. In Arena, you're not given that option to make it as strong as possible because you're basically at the mercy of whatever you're offered. And because of you're building a deck, you're kind of piecing it together, right? One of the things that ends up happening is, your opponent might have a little bit stronger tempo than your tempo. Like they might have a 3/4 and you only have a 3/3. You can't really change the fact that you have a weaker minion in that respect. You might have to tempo your Earthen Ring Farseer. And now it's like, well, how am I going to deal with this Sunwell Initiate that's got basically three Divine Shields or whatever, How do I deal with this thing? One of the easiest ways to deal with it is if you have pings built into your deck because you might not always have the mana to use your hero power or might not even have a hero power that does ping. But if your minions have it, you can deal with it, It comes to one of the core things that I always have preached when I stream, which is that in Arena, you really need to have what I call flexible damage. And what flexible damage means, flexible damage is when you have board states where you get to choose how minions trade into things so that you get the maximum amount of damage to face and you get the maximum amount of efficiency with your boards. If you take that's one of the reasons why I think I want to bring up Coordinated Strike because I think in Demon Hunter, it's a very underrated card and it's a card that's not drafted nearly enough when I watch people draft. Because sure, it's just 3 1/1s. But the thing is, they're 3 1/1s that they rush and they can go wherever you want them to. And that really matters early game. So it might not have that great of an effect late game comparatively, but in the early game, it's good both, but it's really strong early. And basically, it's why Expendable Performers is so dumb. Like you play 7/1/1s, and it's like even if their board state's kind of like crazy and all over the place, you have 14/1/1s essentially that you can put wherever you want, and you can basically take almost anything out. So
Yeah, I think the strength of all the minion cards, so from Elven Archer all the way to Expendable Performers and every step in between, is they allow you to do two things with one card. They allow you to produce bodies for the board, which Expendable Performers leaves you with whatever 1/1s are left. So does Coordinated Strike. So does Elven Archer. And at the same time, you're able to remove your opponent's tempo advantage. So you're gaining a mana advantage on the board as well as producing something that goes on the board itself. So anytime you can do two things with one card, that always ends up being very strong. And I think that's why the minions are often the strongest form of ping. And that's why Aug Merchants have really shown over the last few years, well, the last year and a half. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know it's because the way with the Demon Hunter rotations,
Yeah.
they've been around forever. It's like just like Dormans and everything.
But I think that's the key is developing the board plus removing your opponent's board with all wrapped up into one card, whether that is an Elven Archer or an Expendable Performers, is a really powerful recipe for getting ahead on the board.
Right, and so that's a reason why typically in a vacuum the classes that have pings in their hero power to some degree or another typically end up being the strongest classes because no matter what they draft, they're able to solve that problem by using their hero power. Whereas other classes, like Priest or Warrior, like they can't do anything with their hero power when they need a flexible damage. It's not something they can do. So one thing I want to bring up is if you are drafting a class that is not one of the ping classes, you need to make extra sure that you build those into your deck way more so than the other classes. And on the flip side, when you're playing as one of the ping classes, you can consider like maybe not having to take a ping card that might be really good because that maybe you need value or something else. So they have those classes have the luxury of being able to choose, where some other classes really unfortunately kind of need to take them where they can get them.
Yeah.
So
I think that leads us right into other cards that give us that double board presence thing, like cards that are not hero power specific. And I would say that's the weapons, right?
Yes.
The weapons, because those allow you to do the same kind of thing as a minion, where it gives you board presence. Even though weapons don't look like they give you board presence, they're providing you with an effect that you can use to control the board on the subsequent turns. So things like Light's Justice, True Aim, Crescent, I think are the and there's been quite a few throughout history. I think everybody's been frustrated going up against a little rusty hook from what was the 1-mana 1/1 pirate?
Oh, you're talking about the Zoss First Mate. Yep.
The Zoss First Mate. Yeah, all these cards that provide you with that little bit of how about even Upgrade? I've played Upgrade as a spell without having weapon in play all the time. So all of these cards that allow you to get a quick weapon down, and then Candle Shot. Candle
Shot just came into the meta now, and that one when it first came out was devastating. And the thing was that the thing about Candle Shot is the damage that you don't take any damage with that ping, which is great, but is not even what makes the card great. What makes the card great, like taking the damage, is not normally an issue for Hunter. What the issue is the fact that they don't have ways to always produce pings. Now they have built over the last year or two with the way they've changed the way Hunter is with a lot of their rush in these cards that ping, do 1 damage, then put a 1/1 rush on the board. They've definitely changed that. 1/1 pings in Hunter are much easier to find now. But at the time that Candle Shot first came out, there was not nearly as many pings. And one of the things that they need to really focus on is not basically getting stuck into terrible trades into like taunts and stuff early on, like a Tar Creeper or something, because if they trade off all their little minions, then all their pressure is gone immediately, and so the game almost is over. So,
and that's where pings shine so much in those tempo-based classes. I think that's why Hunter's been under the. I don't know. It's never been one of the top classes, really. Only a few times throughout history when we have Spellstone shenanigans or whatever.
Right.
It's always been slightly behind because it does not have access to that ping ability so easily, and also it requires you to control the board early. Now that's changed a little bit with Teacher's Pet and Jewel of Zoth. Well, all the big Hunter combination cards now, but for the most part, Hunter's biggest weakness is that it can't control the board early because it does not have a hero power that affects the board.
Yeah.
Um, so just like Kel's saying, the most important thing when you're playing a class like specifically Paladin or Hunter, is to find those pings and make sure you have access to them. They've been
Yeah.
doing a great job with Warrior since the dawn of time, giving them pings. I think they recognize that weakness of their hero power early on, and they've had from Ravaging Ghoul to upgrade to whatever you want to say, Death's Bite. They've had a
Hmm.
number of AOE pings as well as just generic pings with blood to Ichor and all those things. So um, Warriors already had access to that just in their regular suite of cards, but these classes like Paladin and Hunter that really require board presence early. If you are not able to draft those early 1 mana ping spells or minions or weapons or whatever,
Hmm.
you're going to end up falling so far behind that your hero power will have zero effect on the game, and that's when you lose very badly.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of one thing we can bring up too is there's a lot of minions like Alley Cat and stuff that have kind of the similar thing where you're putting a board out that has pings built into it. One thing I think Blizzard has realized over basically since I would say like Witchwood was when Rush was brought into the game. They started basically getting rid of all charge and adding Rush. But one thing I think I've noticed is they realized, I think they finally have accepted that spells that produce, like for instance, there's like the Murloc one that puts 4/1/1s on the board. Spells that basically put one. I think they always wanted people to have flexible damage, but didn't realize it was just too punishing to basically spend that much mana to put something on the board and it have no effect. So they finally, I think, I really feel like looking at the cards over the last bit of time here, they've realized that these type of spells, like they need to have rush. They need to, if you're going to spend for lots of little mini minions, they need to have the ability to affect the game immediately. So that a lot of you notice over the like recently, a lot of these spells, all these 1/1s have rush, which is great
Right.
for an arena player because, like I said, it's basically pings are basically the problem solvers of arena. I would give them that high of a praise.
I think pings and 2 drops. That's actually, I never thought of it this way.
Yeah,
But if you don't have pings and you don't have 2 drops, you're gonna have a rough time. I think
yeah.
those are probably the two most important subcategories or small categories of cards. Now that doesn't count for curve or um, you know uh, card quality or anything like that. But you need pings and you need 2 mana spells or minions
Hmm.
to have a real competitive deck. Huh. I'm glad we talked about it this way because this is reframing it for me as at what level of importance I need to place the pings. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to talk about pseudo pings as well because there's a
Sure.
number of cards that provide a ping-like effect without actually being a ping itself. The one that comes to mind most obviously to me is Direwolf Alpha. I think it's the most classically so the
Okay.
HS replay stats for Direwolf Alpha are incredible. It's a very good card according to HS replay. It has been for a long time, especially more recently with the prevalence of tokens.
Yeah.
But that card is not technically a ping, but it allows minions to do a slightly more damage. So that's where that's not as powerful. It's not nearly as powerful as a direct ping, but it does give you the ability to be more flexible with how you play your turns. So, for example, if you played a 1 mana 2/2 or something, or a 1 mana, I don't know, whatever, a 1 mana minion, and your second turn, you're left with the option of playing a regular 2 drop or a Direwolf Alpha and either trading up a minion with your 1 drop or going face for an extra damage. Now you have a real decision, and I think cards like Direwolf Alpha do a really good job of balancing that extra point of ping with the big disadvantage of having it being attached to a minion.
Hmm.
There's a few other cards that do this. I think the other big category would be the weapon buffers. There's quite a few of them at neutral now because of
Hmm.
the most recent classic and basic update. All the minions that buff your weapon by a +1 attack.
Hmm.
Not a ping, but it has a similar effect in the sense that it upgrades your attack points by 1. Wriggling Horror, another and side buff minions, kind of like Direwolf Alpha in the same vein. Another way of increasing the total damage of the minions that you have on board, but obviously not as powerful as direct pings, and require more things to be on the board, like minions. And then finally, the last one I was thinking of for like fake pings or pseudo pings would be, uh-oh, I was just thinking it, and now I forgot what the last one was. What's the last kind of
Do
ping,
you
Kel?
remember
Do you
what
have
it
it?
does, or do you don't remember it at all?
Oh no, I don't remember it at all. I was so excited to talk about it, and I don't remember the last type of pseudo ping. We'll come back to it. I'll say it in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, You know, what's funny is I actually was wondering when they did the buffs for Core Set if they were going to make Direwolf a 2/3. I don't think it would actually make the card broken.
Oh
But
wait, no, that helped me.
Raid Leader?
It's Raid Leader Stormwind
It
Champion.
is.
There we
Oh,
go.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the AOE, all of your minion things. So there's no positional requirements, but the overall cost for the minion itself is not worth it. And then that includes things like Mark of the Lotus, Power of the Wild, that are not technically pings, but they are an AOE 1 point damage increaser, which serves a similar purpose to a ping. Also very powerful cards, and I think that's why cards like Mark of the Lotus are so very, very good. It's not just because they give your minions that extra health. It allows you to trade up those bad, cheap, or not bad, but those cheap minions that you played early.
I'm gonna fight to try to get. I'm gonna probably sneak Mark of the Lotus onto the 64. I think it's probably one of the most underrated, overpowered arena cards ever. Because in that meta with Abyssal Enforcer, I think there's two cards that really define that meta: Mark of the Lotus and Abyssal Enforcer. Those two cards were. I don't think Druid was probably good enough, maybe in that meta, to really show it off that specific meta. But
wait, you don't think that Potion of Madness had any effect
wait, on what?
on that meta?
Oh, you mean it being like, oh shit.
I hated Potion of Madness.
Okay, it was
meta.
really bad. Okay, that's true. Potion of Madness. That actually might be on the list too. I don't know. It's gonna be so hard to actually, like, once we get to like even to 100, me trying to like cut off enough to get to 64 is gonna be hard. I'm gonna have to figure. It'll probably be easier once I put them all on a list in front of me. But no, but you're right. The pseudo ping things are really interesting because, like, and actually one of the reasons Direwolf has gotten so much better, in my opinion, on top of what you were saying, is that just the fact that there is so much rush, because you can basically take the minions on your board that get +1 on either side of it, and then you can sneak the rush minion. Either your spell summons it to the one side, and then you can use the extra ping on each minion, each one that goes past it, or you can just like take your claw machine and just stick it right next to it, and all of a sudden it does 7 before it dies.
Elden Smug Senior.
Yeah, and those things are. And again, I've been using Direwolf to help me deal with Sunwell Initiates, and I brought that up before. Direwolf's definitely been on my hit list of cards that I might not take it over like an overpowered card or something, but I definitely don't feel bad when it's offered and it's the one I gotta take, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, well, I think, is there any other topic we need to talk about this? Because I have a little bow to wrap this up with if you're ready.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, like we covered, if you guys were listening, we covered the heroes, we covered the minions that ping on battle cries, we covered pseudo pings, we covered weapons, and we covered, I think we covered it all. So yeah, go ahead, wrap it up.
I think that in totality, the reason that ping is so powerful is that it allows you to do things for less mana than you should be able to. When you can trade a 2-mana 2/3 into a 2-mana 2/3 and then kill it, you're saving mana. That's it. You're just saving mana. You end up with a 2/1 that's left over, and your opponent doesn't have a board. In the first 3 to 4 turns of the game, saving 1 mana is a huge percentage of your total mana expended. So by turn 6, or let's say, sorry, by turn 3, you've only had access to a total of 6 mana. If you used 1 of that mana to play an Ethereal Og Merchant and finish off your opponent's 2/3 or whatever minion they played, you have, by the metric I used earlier, you have saved a mana and a half, so you have spent 7.5 mana, while your opponent has only spent 6 at most. That is a really big percentage of the total mana spent for board presence in the game so far. Now, that obviously pings do not quite last as well to the late game. They can be very important later, but getting that early game advantage through mana is incredibly important. It also allows you, if you've fallen behind in the early game and your opponent has spent more mana than you, say you don't have a 1-drop or a 2-drop and your opponent goes coin 2 into 2. They've spent 4, you spent 0. You untap, you play a 3-drop and a 2-drop and a ping, or a hero power and a ping. You've actually almost caught up already. You're only a mana back by then, or mana and a half back, or down a mana, or 3 to 4 mana, possibly that turn, if you hadn't had access to a ping. So while ping is important for a lot of reasons, it's important because it finishes off minions you couldn't kill. It's important because it interacts well with subsets of cards like Divine Shield, Pings, and Equality. It has all these little interactions that work really well. That's what drives it over the top. But at the core, the power of ping is that it's undercosted for what you spend. And I think that's why it's so very important, especially in the early game, as well as even more important for those classes that don't have natural access to it through their hero power.
Yeah, man. And it's also, like I said, the flexible damage, man. You just get to choose where it goes, and you can, one thing I was just thinking about when you were talking was, like, I don't know if you guys, one example I can bring up is, your opponent makes better trades than you, and he's sitting there with like a 4-1, and you've got a 4-4 in your hand, and like if you can't remove that 4-1 and his 4-1 is able to kill your 4-4, the game can sometimes almost just be over. If you can't if his minion is able to get 2 trades like that, and get that much value, like there's just not a lot of ways to recover unless you got board clears and stuff. So it's super important. Those situations come up a lot. So I think that was a good way to wrap it up, Kellen. Yeah, I'm glad we got to do this episode and talk about something I'm passionate about, which is the power of ping, man. It's very underrated. So yeah, make sure you guys take time when you're looking at your decks and your drafts and your gameplay to see, like, watch how that actually affects your games, or like even situations where it's like, man, if I had just had this ping in this situation, I might have won. You'll see how much it matters. So, all right, that's gonna do it for the not the 20th. That's next week, 19th episode of the Kelcast. You can join us live, 8 p.m. Eastern every week on Twitch. You can download the podcast wherever you get them every Monday. Remember, you guys can search the Kelcast on Google, and you'll see every single place that you could possibly download it from will come up. You can also find me on Twitch where I stream, or you can find me on YouTube or Twitter by searching Keldar. That's Keludar. Make sure you tune in next week where we'll reveal the first 64 cards that we're gonna, the first 64 cards of the most powerful arena cards ever, the tournament. It'll be a tournament to the death. So, and also we want to make sure we say thank you to John Laux for the music in the episode, for the intro and outro. Sounds super nice. This has been the Kelcast. We'll see you next week.
All right, see you later.
All right.
Okay, so Kel.
Okay.
I'm a gymnastics coach, right? I don't know if if you're aware of that.
I'm pretty sure all our listeners are aware that you're into gymnastics.
Okay. So Simone Biles, have you heard of Simone Biles? You know this woman?
Yeah.
She's the greatest gymnast that's ever lived. It's not even close.
Yeah.
She competed the most difficult vault of all time. It's never been competed before. It's called a Yurchenko double pike. Basically, she does a back handspring up onto the big vault table. She launches herself off her hands into the air, and she flips over backwards twice. And the thing that makes it even more impressive is she does that while her legs are straight. She basically folds her body in half instead of making her into a much more aerodynamic ball. So this is really hard. It's mind-blowing. It's game-breaking. It feels like every season she comes up with 1 or 2 new skills that no one's ever even considered doing before.
Yeah.
And every single time, the whole sports media world is like, oh, she's not going to be able to compete it. It's not going to be good enough. Well, guess what? She does it every time. She can always compete it. She's absolutely incredible. And here's why this is frustrating. She never gets the value that her skills are worth. The judges do not ever give her the right value. She always gets undervalued, and there's a lot of like political reasons why, but it's unbelievable. It's so ridiculously frustrating. She deserves the credit for the skills that she's competed, and I just don't understand why they won't give her the freaking credit. Oh, I can cuss. It's the end.
Yeah.
Why don't they give her the fucking credit, Kel? I don't understand. Give her credit for unbelievable skill and talent. Stop stealing her points away from her and give credit where it's due. It's very frustrating, and I don't understand why. Every gymnastics coach is pretty much upset about this, and I just wish they would award her for the incredible job she's done in promoting the sport and producing skills no one's ever seen.
I like it.
That's all I had. It makes me so mad.
See you guys next week. Okay. That's it. We did it.
That's a real one. I'm actually really mad about that.